Hello, hello, hello. The team here at MalWerewolf wants to thank you for watching this episode of Bite-Sized featuring PSImage by Barrett Adams. I am Destructicon and wanted to show you just a few of the gotchas I ran into while using the module. First and foremost, if you are utilizing PowerShell and you run into problems trying to execute the couple different things out there, you can try and do your set execution policy bypass prior. It will pop up telling you that the current policy won't let you run this. However, in this specific case, I didn't run into that type of problem. So to give you an example, what we can do here is we can do set execution policy bypass, and then don't forget you got to import the module. So if we're going to import and now when we actually do an invoke, we should be able to see Invoke-PSImage. So now we have our means to a commandlet. So if because it has parameters, you will be able to just kind of put them in one by one. But if you happen to know what they are off the top of your head, you could just put them in like this. So one thing I would like to mention, one thing that is of note is Defender did a pretty darn good job at finding the different ways I tried to load this in. I currently have a script set up to keep Defender disabled and just a scheduled task to constantly run that script. So you'll see a PowerShell screen pop up for a second and then close down. It's mostly just because Windows will try and turn that sucker back on at kind of random intervals. So just be aware of that if you're messing with things yourself. You may have to build a similar script, but for this case, you may be able to tweak the actual PowerShell script, the Invoke-PSImage, to potentially get around it. But both this and the one-liner that gets generated did get caught many times when I was messing around with different ways to push the payload. The other thing is that overly large images, they do tend to have problems when trying to do this. So to provide an example here, let me show you what the error looks like. So if I've got my script, I want to dump it out to my desktop as cows.png, and I've got this large.png file. So when I hit enter, it's going to grab the script, it's going to dump it in between kind of the slack space, if you will, of the image, and we see that it actually dumped out a index out of range error. Now, if I do the same thing against a smaller version of that picture, so that png.png, we'll see that it dumped out perfectly fine. So that's one thing to remember, is if you do kind of run into some of the issues, make sure you get maybe potentially a smaller image, or try a different type of image if not for anything else. Try a JPG. In my case, I actually used a JPG in the video. And the one last thing to mention was in the text, it says to use web request in order to build out an actual request for a web page where you're hosting your image. In our cases, if we try it, it says it doesn't know what web request is here. So I actually jumped into the script and looked for web request. You see here within the notes, it says a parameter web request, output everything to web client. But if we hit next again, there's nothing else referencing web request. Because it's called web client, I actually did a search on web client, and sure enough, I find that within the parameter part, it has a switch to web client. So it seems like you shouldn't use web request, use web client, and then it will work as intended, as seen here. So let's do move.png. One of the other things to mention in the text, it also says that the output is always PNG. It's got to be lossless. So from that perspective, just know that you are going to be outputting a PNG file. So here we go. Here's our one-liner. This is what we send to the victim. And just make sure that you fix this. Change it to where you are hosting your image, whether it's on your listener, whether it's on a completely separate CNC infrastructure, or maybe you just host it on an S3 bucket. Those are some good potential examples. But as it runs through everything, looks for the script, well, in here, it will look through it. And then right here is the execution of the script based off the string of data that's within there. So again, Defender did find a lot of this stuff. It hit on both the PSImage module, trying to import it. It also hit on the attempt to launch this whole thing. Now, that doesn't mean that it's impossible to make this work. Probably just adding in a little bit of obfuscation will probably work, or potentially work. But it is one of the things that I did want to mention. This isn't meant to show folks how to evade anything in any way, shape, or form. This is just showing some pretty neat little ideas that are out there. And again, in this case, this is by someone named Barrett Adams. And it's a pretty fun little idea of steganography. All right. We will see you next time on the next episode of the Bite-Sized. Looking to try and build out a listener bite-sized episode to show you how to build up a listener and some things to think about when you're making one, as well as some alternatives. This is not meant to be CNC interactable infrastructure in the sense that you're going to get some kind of shell. However, that is something that we will talk about, even potentially utilizing some cool stuff like ngrok burrow, being able to punch through 443 as part of your tunnel to make it look like just standard web traffic, but what you're actually doing is going back to a netcat listener on your box. So that's one of the things that we will kind of dig into at some point. If you have any questions or anything that I might be able to help answer, please leave a comment. I will do what I can to actually respond. And thank you very much. Hope you found this informative.